So Madura Cave is one of the larger collections that we have. There's different caves on here. There's Webb's and ones with some great Australian names like Wee Bubby and Muralevan and Kumalabuka. So we get people from Australia coming to visit this stuff, and they all know Ernie. Yeah, you know. It was interesting. Every time I'd meet one, their first words like, "Yeah, he's like the father of Australian paleontology. Everybody knows Ernie in Australia," and he specialized in rodents, so very small fossils. If you can see that, it's got its catalog number on there. And he collected this, 70 years ago.
You're within about a month now of being 98, a little less than a month.
That's right.
You've had almost, if you count your student years, you've had almost an 80-year career. Is that about right?
Let me see. I guess that's probably pretty close to right.
Well, let's talk about this last paper.
Yeah.
One that just came out.
Yeah.
Well, when did you start work on that?
I think this was 1955.
Ernie did his PhD at University of Chicago, and when he finished that, he got a Fulbright Scholarship to go to Australia. And he gets to start exploring some of these localities, places people hadn't really collected from before, one of which was Madura Cave.
I do have a vague recollection of helping them map the cave because they would give me one end of the measuring rope and tell me to go, stand over there, stand over there, stand over there.
Wow, look at this.
Then the next couple of years, he and his colleague Bill Turnbull collected thousands of specimens and brought all of that material back here and started working on it.
So we get a really good picture of everything that lived in an area from going in and collecting sediment out of a cave. So then we need students to go through under a microscope and look for all the cool little finger bones and teeth and skulls and whatever might be left of the small animals. And then there's the actual research part, trying to figure out what part of the anatomy is this, what animal did it come from. So it takes quite a bit of labor.
There was an early paper in 1963 which Ernie described in general what he had seen and what they were finding, but then he and Bill Turnbull wrote a whole series of papers from 73 to 99.
So we'd write up the various taxonomic groups, the kangaroos here, wallabies here, and then right at the end we had the rodents and the bats to do, and unfortunately Bill died. And I sort of said, oh, hell, I'll let it go for a while.
Now tell me, who was Bill Turnbull and what does he mean to you in your career?
Oh, he's an old friend. Bill was a fellow student with me at the University of Chicago. So we've known each other since, I think it was 1948.
All right, Ernie.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Cindy. So, Dad?
Yeah.
I found an interesting little collection of photographs. Here's this picture of you when you were a baby.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Oh, here's a nice picture of you and Bill from the 1960s. That's you, that's Bill, and it looks like there's burlap and you have a bunch of bones spread out there.
Yeah.
This picture is hard to see too. It says Giant's Cave, Margaret River, Western Australia, about 1955.
Yeah.
And I think that's you and inside the cave.
Yeah.
Oh, here's a good picture.
Oh,
Looks
yeah.
like you're completely soaking wet.
Well, we had to crawl through a passageway that was flooded.
I see.
Yeah.
I'm wondering when you first started thinking about being a paleontologist. How far back does that go?
About 8 years old.
Is that right?
And then this is a picture of you from 1942, and it looks like you have a rock there. You look like quite the budding geologist there.
Yeah. We used to go when I was a kid down to Brushy Creek for picnics and whatnot. So I was throwing rocks. And I picked up this thing and I looked at it and thought, this looks like a clam.
kind of tough, Clem, at this point.
Yeah, and I said, okay, this just fascinated me.
And then this was a picture of the University of Chicago Geology Department in the early 1950s. I found you here and Mom here.
Let me.
You want to look with your magnifying glass?
Yeah, let me see if I can make
anything looks. I think that's you right there.
Yeah, that's right. I think
and that's Mom right there.
Yeah.
She was so instrumental in what he did, just being, first of all, very supportive. Also, she edited all of his papers. So she was super important. They were married for 70 years until she died last year.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. And how about this picture, Dad? There you are walking into the vertebrate paleontology lab. That's out at Pickle, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, that's right.
When did you first go out to the lab?
Oh, let me see. When I went off to the Army, I was gone, for about 18 months. So came back, the collection then had been moved out to Pickle.
So, Ernie started as a student at UT in 1945.
What was your general impression of campus when you showed up as a freshman?
To me, it was a very friendly place. I must admit, I enjoyed my time at UT.
Then he went off to Chicago, did his PhD, then came back to the University of Texas and started his career teaching.
When you joined the faculty,
Yeah.
do you remember the first class that you taught? What that was like?
I think I learned a lot from the students. I hope they learned from me.
Is it bringing back memories for us to be driving down here?
Oh, yeah, you can.
So, Dad, I'm kind of driving from a vague memory. You're going the wrong way.
You're doing okay.
Okay.
Turn right up here.
Okay.
He had many, many students that came through the program here at the University of Texas over the years. And of course, his students have gone on to do all sorts of things everywhere in terms of continuing that legacy.
There he is.
Hey, good to see you, Glenn. Hey,
Good to see you. Yeah.
this fellow's one of my students.
That's what I hear.
This is one of the best places in the world to come to study vertebrate paleontology. People come to visit here from all over.
This collection right here is one of the big ones in North America. It's got some aspects to it that I think a lot of other big collections don't have.
All these rows of cabinets are filled with fossils, and it's a large 3D library of information. They're organized stratigraphically, which means that if you're at this end of the building, you're looking at fossils that are only a few thousand years old. When you get to the very back of the building, you're into a period called the Silurian, so then you're talking hundreds of millions of years old. Yeah, so you look and almost half of this lab is, last ice age material. A lot of it he collected, or he's responsible for collecting, and it's here because he was widely respected by, so many people. This is all Natomies.
Rats.
Rats, yeah.
This is what we worked with.
Ah,
Have a look at it.
they're tiny.
They're small, all right.
They are tiny. They're so small, we literally mount them on the head of a pin. There you go.
Okay.
Does that bring back memories, Ernie?
Yeah.
A few years back, I would hear my father bring up this fact that there was this one last part that they hadn't published yet.
There you go. It's one of the macropodids.
Because he and Bill had written a whole series of papers about Madura Cave, but this was the last one.
So you would have dug that one up in
55, most likely. That's a nice specimen.
he always sounded kind of regretful, and I would say, oh, well, why don't you get another co-author?
So one day we were all together talking, and the manuscript came up. It sure would be nice if somebody could help Ernie get this done. Wink, wink,
Steve was like the perfect person then to get this last part of the paper finished.
Professor Lundelius, how
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm still making noise.
Yeah, well, it was just kind of taking it all and bringing it up to date, because he had started to do some preliminary work on it, and there was just one or two specimens of this genus called Natomes, which is a hopping mouse. And I thought, oh, well, this will be pretty easy. I'll clean it up. I'll go look at those 2 or 3 specimens. I realized there were 1,100. And so that actually took me 5 or 6 months to go through that part of the sample. It turns out that there's one species of Natomes that has a little groove down the anterior edge of that incisor.
Yeah.
And that's how you tell the species.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that was really fun was I was able to bring some of the new technology that we have on Jackson School and main campus, which is the CT lab. And some of that ended up in the paper. So the paper actually ends up with this interesting mix of scanning electron microscope photographs from the 80s and then CT images from 2024, but I think it all works together.
He had some good additions here and there, and in the end, sort of added his name as a third author.
Made it.
You found us.
Okay.
I know he had like drafts of his paper. That's the printout.
Oh, yeah.
So if you look through there, you'll see there's a lot of photographs.
Interestingly, it came out in the records of the Western Australia Museum. And the people there that were like the editors of it knew Ernie, and they wanted it to come out in their journal.
What was it like to hold that in your hands for the first time?
Well, obviously I was pleased I finally done.
Checked it off.
Yeah, right. Yes.
Can you tell us what we're looking at exactly?
You're looking at the upper jaw, the palate of one of the bats that came out of that cave.
If you remember back to what we did in the Madura Cave paper here,
Yeah.
in terms of a full faunal list, so that's 30,000 years of history. When you think about the history of this, Ernie went to Australia in 1955 for the first time, visited Madura Cave. 2025, 70 years later, we've finally got the last part of the science done. There's something to be said for perseverance and patience.
I was glad to see this thing finally out.
Yeah, me too.
And you did a good job on that, I must say.
thanks.
I had Jennifer read it to me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'll see if this works.
I tend, and this is probably not what I should be doing, but I tend to think, well, this is Ernie's last paper. But no, he's not done. He's still got ideas, and he's still thinking about what he'd want to do next.
I don't know what to do about that, except sit down with all this stuff and devote a year to it.
Yeah, you got some money to pay for it?
No?
He has this great saying, and it always goes like this. It says, Steve, why don't you come down and have lunch, and let's exchange some great ideas. It's always that, forget all the other noise around us. Let's talk about some interesting science.